My name is Jay Espy. I was the president and CEO of Maine Coast Heritage Trust from 1988 to 2008. But I started in 1985 as associate director. And part of my job there was to help local land trusts get formed around the state. So I spent quite a bit of time doing that. And then in 2008, I left Maine Coast Heritage Trust after 23 years and became the first executive director of the Elmina B. Sewell Foundation here in Freeport, which I did until 2019 when I left that job and COVID hit and I wound up retiring. I had no idea what I wanted to do after I left Bowdoin. And Sue Livesey, who is a resident down in the Pennellville area, was one of the career counselors at Bowdoin. And I went to see her after a talk that she had presented or brought some panelists to present about possible summer internships. I met with her and she said, well, Jay, you know, you're going to have to do something when you leave Bowdoin, so you might want to consider an internship that might be a launching pad for you. She helped me get in touch with some people, which then did develop into an internship with the Maine Department of, or it was the Bureau of Parks and Lands at the time, Bureau of Parks and Recreation at the time. And she then continued to help me after I had that internship my senior year with another internship that helped me understand that maybe this is what I wanted to do. And she also helped me get a job with an environmental consulting firm. So I knew that I wanted to be outdoors and I wanted to do something in the environment, but I wasn't sure what it would be. So, you know, it took a few years before I decided to go back to graduate school and do a joint program in forestry and business, so I could hedge my bets, basically. And the rest was history. I grew up in Ohio, in Southwest Ohio, but also came to Maine because my grandmother lived in Biddeford. So I knew that I wanted to be kind of up this way, and I spent a lot of time outdoors. Again, starting with fishing and hunting, but then getting into hiking and discovering mountains and thinking those are pretty cool, and the ocean as well. So it all started to come together a little bit as I thought about what I really was interested in and then what the job possibilities and career possibilities might be. I had been working with local land trusts and organizations and individuals who were interested in forming local land trusts around the state. And I might back up for a second and just give you a little history. Maine Coast Heritage Trust, in its early days, did not think it would exist for that long. It was going to protect all the land that needed to be protected in Maine and then go out of business. So it didn't hold any conservation easements. It didn't own any land. And it was basically working with landowners to help them gift conservation easements and land to various entities, whether it be the state, the National Park Service, the Nature Conservancy, or local land trusts that were starting to get formed around the state. So in 1985, when I was very new and very green at conservation, I got a call from, I believe, Jan Bodwell, and she asked if I would meet with a group of people in the Brunswick area, particularly landowners or neighbors of Pennellville Meadow, to talk to them about how they could conserve Pennellville Meadow. That was their big concern at the time. And so we met, and that's where I met Jack Ailey and I think Bob Biette and some others who asked about how they might conserve Pennellville Meadow. They were concerned it was going to be developed. And I believe at that time they were also starting to work on a plan to buy the land and then conserve it. It was really one of the very first projects I worked on there, and I helped them start the land trust and work through various mechanisms for conserving the property. I had no idea that they would be as successful as they have been. You know, they were just a group of neighbors trying to protect, frankly, their backyard at the time. But I knew they had inspiration and a desire to do more in the community. What I didn't expect is that they would soon after that, it took a little while, but soon after that, take on Crystal Spring Farm, which really was transformative for the organization in a number of ways, both in terms of the land, the quality of the land they were protecting. Not that Pennellville Meadow wasn't important, it was, but the fact that they got into farming, which was really unusual for local land trusts at the time. There were very few local land trusts doing farmland conservation. And there were some skeptics around protecting a farm and then keeping it in farming. You know, the model was protect the land, allow some recreational use, but that's about it. But the fact that they decided to go forward and actually keep and restore an agricultural resource in the community changed the game completely. It really got the community involved. It was seen as a really important and valuable asset to the town and the region. And, you know, history tells us that they had a pretty good idea of what they were doing, and they did it very well. It has changed everything in terms of how that land trust is viewed and how they're serving community. The Pennellville Meadow project was a pretty typical project for conservation in Maine. Generally, people who were interested in the places that they cared the most about, which were the places they knew the best, the places that affected where they lived most directly, were generally the projects that came forward. You know, I think if they were starting over again, what other kinds of uses or opportunities there might be at Pennellville Meadow, I'm not sure. Could there be more recreation? Could it be farmed in some ways? I don't think that's the vision for that community currently. I think it was a well-done project at the time, but a launching pad for a lot more sophisticated kind of conservation going forward. You know, it was transformative for me in that it taught me a lot about how to move forward, and there were people who were frankly a lot more seasoned in the world in general. I was 28 years old at the time. It definitely helped launch my career, let's put it that way, and gave me some inspiration that, hey, this might work actually. We might be able to form local land trusts, and there might be people interested in this throughout the state. They've really built on the goals of the original sort of vision for the organization and expanded that vision quite substantially, which I think conservation in general has expanded its vision of what, first of all, what it means in community, you know, what its place is, how it can diversify the population it serves better, make more land accessible in different ways, whether it be for, you know, for wildlife, or be for farming, or be for recreation, and how it can serve people who might have disabilities. That's become something that I know BTLT has looked into more and really taken some action on. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is something that they have pursued and are continuing to pursue. And just becoming more attuned to the needs of the community and serving it in ways that I don't think anybody would have anticipated 30 years ago or 40 years ago. I think community involvement is essential. I mean, why does it exist? It exists, yes, to protect the landscape, to protect important properties of all sorts. But it is a community member, and I think land trusts have become more and more aware of how important that role is and how there aren't really any substitutes for that. So, you know, it also is essential for the survival of the organization. You know, the fact that they have over 1,000 members have been able to take some big risks, like trying to protect Crystal Spring Farm. There was a lot of money that had to be raised to do that. So the fact that they took those risks really bit off probably more than they thought they could chew at the time that they did that. And then, you know, some people worked really hard, and the community got more and more involved because it really meant a lot to them to see this vision realized. It goes back to Crystal Spring Farm. There were, as I mentioned before, there were some skeptics, and there were some people saying, look, if you're going to go into the farming business, which is not your business, your mission is to protect land and set it aside. If you're going to go into that business, then I'm not going to support you for that. And they said, they realized, wait a minute, this is key to our community. This is something we simply must do, and we have a passion to do. And so they took a big risk. Taking that risk and accomplishing the goal made all the difference. It proved the vision that they'd had originally. Calculated risks, not just crazy risks, but calculated risks have tended to do the best and to be able to accomplish the most, because there's a lot more to do than any small nonprofit can do until it can prove itself. Its success starts to build on its success. Brunswick is a really nice place to live. And part of that is because of the conserved lands that BTLT has had a role in protecting. It's also helped a lot of landowners figure out, what the alternatives to just simply straight up development might be. How does this community maintain its livability? How are different people in the community served? All of those things have, I think, contributed to Brunswick-Topsham's, the region's growth and economic growth and livability. One thing that really struck me during my entire career was we were involved at Maine Coast Heritage Trust in a major capital campaign seeking to double the amount of conserved land along the coast of Maine. It was called the Campaign for the Coast. The thing that inspired me the most as we were raising money for that was a letter I got from a woman in the Brunswick area who said to me, "Here's $5. I'm on fixed income. I do not have a lot of money, but what you're doing is really important. And so I'm giving you $5, and I promise to give $5 a month for as long as this campaign is operable." And you're still raising money. It's like, wow. I mean, we'd received some $5 million gifts, but somebody who really probably couldn't afford to support us in that way, clearly couldn't, was still making a contribution because it meant so much to her. That was amazing to me. Still amazing to me. There's so many different ways one can live a fulfilling life. And I would say, especially if you have the privilege, frankly, of being able to think about this, follow your gut, follow your passion. I had a choice to make when I was leaving graduate school. I had a choice of going and working for a business consulting firm or coming back to Maine and working for Maine Coast Heritage Trust. One was a lot more lucrative than the other, as you can imagine. And I chose Maine Coast Heritage Trust, in part because I knew I wanted to live in Maine, at least as I was at that age. And I wanted to do something that was going to be, I thought, really interesting and really fun and fulfilling. It doesn't always work out that you can do what you love, but if you can, that's what I'd pursue. No matter what it is. If you love banking, and you love the environment, figure out how you can do banking that helps the environment. Whatever it is, follow it and see where it leads.